Everybody, my name is Angel. I'm an alcoholic and drug addict. I've been through the process with 3 Big Book Step Study sponsors, a loving God, been to meetings like this, people like you, practice 10, 11, and 12 to the best of my willingness. I got a couple more appointments to be made. I'm going to be attending one tomorrow. Thank you, Mike. Tina asked me to speak, and she wasn't here, so I was like, man, now I got off the hook. That's what I said to Mike. I'm like, no, I didn't get off the hook. This is my first time speaking, so bear with me. But it's a perfect one. It's a very good one. I'll be very brief, share a little experience. So whenever like somebody would irritate me in the past, like I always had alcohol and drugs as like my solution. And it was never really a bothersome because I was so numb all the time. And I didn't like realize that till I got in here. I was probably like a year sober, and something was just, I knew something was wrong. I knew like I needed more than like, don't drink, go to meetings, ask for help. I was going to work. I was irritable all the time, and just like, if you poked me, I probably would snap. Like, if you said, hey, good morning, I probably would, like, have snapped. Like, that's how it was. And, like, someone would do a kind gesture, and it was just, like, it was always something that, like, irritated me, and I didn't like it, you know. I started to, like, feel sore inside. And I was standing outside. I was at a sober house. I was standing outside the sober house. And I was going nuts. I was like, I'm going to end up having to go inside a mental institution because I can't live life. I just can't handle it. And, he said to call your sponsor. That's what one of my friends had said. And at that point, I was just kind of like going to meetings. I had a sponsor. I told myself I had a sponsor. It was just like 3 people that I would call back and forth until one of them said what I wanted to hear, and it never happened. So I ended up getting kicked out of the sober house because I didn't communicate with them. And I ended up, I was at like a turning point. I was either going to go back. I was in Gardner, Mass. at this time. I was going to go back to Western Mass, where I'm from. Going back to doing what I was doing, drinking and drugging, or I was just going to continue on this path. And I reached out, I called a friend, and he's like, yeah, you could come and stay at our house for a little while. So I stayed in the basement, and you could talk to the owner of the house, in the morning. And one of the requirements for staying in that house was to attend a Big Book Step Study meeting, 3 of them a week. And I was like, oh yeah, I could do that. It's just a meeting, you know what I mean? Been going to meetings all this time, and like that day that I ended up walking into that meeting, it was just, I was like mind blown because of all the honesty that was going on in that room. Like that they were sharing like how I felt before, except now they had like a solution and how they dealt and how they dealt with it. It didn't go away, but they were able to like live with it, and that kind of, it attracted me, how honest these people were. At first, it was deep resentment, and it was hatred towards these people because they had confidence. They could, like, look at people in the eye, and I was just, like, so full of hate and anger that, like, that's my reason why I resented them. I was like, this person has confidence. They're walking. They're having a conversation. They're not sitting there worried about what, like, anybody else is thinking or whether they're looking at them. And I was like, man, I hate these people. And, and that, like, I'm so glad I kept on going to this meeting because, like, I still, like, felt this way for a little while until I started doing this work. But, thank God, like, they kept on sharing the solution. I kept on hearing that solution at that meeting. I ended up, when I asked my sponsor, I ended up asking him to help me to go through this work because, he was somebody who, he didn't really take life too seriously. He didn't really, like, take himself too seriously. And he was helping others. And at that point, I was like, always taken myself very seriously, and I thought it was a perfect match. I didn't know that until like afterwards. I was just like, hey, help me. I was like, man, I hope this guy's a good fit, because I always I'd judge right off the bat without even giving something a try. And he helped me go through this process. I started doing some writing, and it was always easier for me to just point the finger and say, my boss is the reason why I'm so miserable, or, my parents are the reason why I'm unhappy. It was always easier, and that's what I would always do, because I never would point the finger back. It never dawned on me that I could be a part of the problem. I was just it was mind-blowing to me to think that. It really was. And once I started to do the turnarounds and point the finger back at me, it was not so much that I stopped having resentments. I'd get resentments, but I was able to see my part in it, and I was able to start slowly seeing that not everybody has a 12-step program, you know what I mean? There are other people that are sick. There's people in traffic, and this doesn't happen all the time, but there's people that they need to be somewhere faster than me. It's not that they cut me off because they were trying to attack me at that moment. It's maybe they could have been on their way to an emergency, or maybe that person just started driving. Maybe that person, I don't know, all these things started to happen, and it was a little bit of weight off the shoulders. I stopped getting so irritated at traffic as much as I was before, sometimes I still get irritated in traffic, who doesn't? But, I can drive at peace most of the time. Man, I'm so glad that we started with this. I love to talk about how life is today and how it manifests with this work. I ended up getting into a verbal conversation, loud verbal talk with my boss, my foreman, and he had delegated a task to me, and his response was not of love and tolerance. And sometimes when that happens, I need to reach out to somebody, because at that point in time, I was having a hard time seeing the truth, and I used to my spiritual toolkit to write out a 10-step so I could see what's my part in it, and if I'm so stuck in self, that's when I call 3 people. I'll reach out to 3 people, and I'll be like, hey, can you help me see the truth in this situation? And the truth is I have to show love and tolerance to people no matter what, you know what I mean? Love and tolerance. And sometimes that's a tough thing to do, is to show love and tolerance to somebody when they're sitting there, swearing up a storm, and, they come off super aggressive. But I'm the alcoholic, right? I'm going to probably be thinking about this, or I could be thinking about this for days on end. That person probably stopped thinking about it that day, and that's the difference. And then I'm not the only person that could be affected by that. That also, once I get home, if I'm still in that mood, now my fiance, now she's affected by that because of my own attitude towards that resentment. But yeah, I've this new job. It's it's very aggressive. You know what I mean? And I've found that I can see a blessing anywhere I am. I try to, and lately it's been, how can I be of service? How can I be helpful? And I found my foreman, he is a sick man. You know what I mean? He's a sick guy. And I've prayed for them, and it was so bizarre. I was going through 2 days of where I was like, man, what's up with these guys? So I started praying for them, and I'm not saying right away I'm that powerful. I prayed and then this happened, but they weren't bothering me as much after I had prayed for them. And I don't know, like, I'm just so grateful that there's tools that I can use when I'm in that mood or when, you know, something sets me off the edge. Yeah, I've definitely experienced, you know, fighting, like it says right here, but the more we fought and tried to have our way, the worse matters got. Definitely, 100%, you know what I mean? When I try to control a situation or I try to change like how they're running things, you know, instead of just going with the flow. And I need to be reminded of that over and over again. There was another part over here about taking personal inventory, you know what I mean? Doing the step 10, like that's a part of my life every day today. That's definitely a part of my life. And I always like to put like, please send feedback if you see anything, you know what I mean? And because I need that. Me personally, I need that feedback. I need people in my life that are going to tell me like the truth. They're going to tell me if I'm like, am I crossing the line? You know, and tell me what I don't want to hear. And that's the type of stuff that helps me to get through the resentments. I never thought that like things bothered me. I found out very fast that I'm a sensitive alcoholic. And, but that's okay. You know what I mean? Like I can still I can set boundaries too. Like just because like somebody may be able to shrug things off better than me, it doesn't mean I need to be a doormat either. And like that's honestly, that was running through my head. I thought that like I had to be sort of doormat where I just had to accept every sort of, like you could just walk all over me, right? I thought that's what that meant. And no, it doesn't. Like I can set boundaries. I can like let people know, hey, you know, X, Y, and Z, I don't like this, you know, and that way the other person knows, you know, where they can joke with me and where they can not joke with me, you know, and man, if I like, and that was all fear-based too. I feel like a lot of this has to do with like fear. A lot of it. It's like I'm scared to stand up for myself, you know, and I don't have to be scared to speak up for myself because there's always like a way of saying things. And I was talking to my general foreman about this. I was like, it's not really like how people, what they're saying, it's how they say it. And it's just, you know, it's how I say things that, you know, that will help me out, basically, you know, and I don't know, I just, I love this chapter. If I get too stuck in resentment, it could ruin my whole day. You know, then I'm not helpful to anybody. I can't afford it. I can't afford resentment. I'm not present when I'm resentful. I'm not present to life. I'm not present to my family. I was saying to my fiance before we started talking, I was like, us communicating before I meditate is not a good thing. Straight up. And she just looks at me like, I'm like, just trust me when I tell you this. Us communicating before I meditate is not a good thing. You know what I mean? So like, I started my day that way. And she joined. I was like, hey, you want to join a meditation? I was like, and she's like, yeah, sure. And I thought it was so awesome. And, you know, I didn't like catch resentment because she wanted to be on the couch. You know what I mean? She wanted to be on the couch. She wanted to be in her own comfort zone. My own MO would be like, no, you have to do it right here, this way, this way, this way, this way. You know, it's just like, it's sick. But, and then like afterwards I was like, oh, did you get anything out of it? She's like, no, I was just sleepy. I was like sharing all this like awesome stuff, like, yeah, control, I don't have to be controlling. And another thing that came out was like, I'm enough, even how I am. You know what I mean? I'm enough. Even though like I have my imperfections, I'm enough. You know, I don't need to seek like outside validation. And yeah, because resentment can come up with that too. You know, if somebody like before, like somebody would like not smile at me, and right away I'd be like, what's wrong with this person? Why aren't they smiling? Why aren't they giving me attention? You know what I mean? And I could still be in that sick mentality of like, why isn't this person looking in this direction? Don't they know who I am? Wave to me. For real, like it's just, oh man. I don't know. How much time do I have? Did I speak enough? I think that's it. If you guys are thinking about going through this, definitely go through it, finish the work. Don't drag it out like I did. It was extremely painful. So yeah, that's all I got.